Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I thought I'd do something a little bit more on the fun side, and we're going to do a tier list talking about squat accessories and variations. I was kind of inspired by TSP Devon and Andrew Salant. They sat down together and made a tier list about kind of long-term programming decisions that you would consider for powerlifting development. And that, got a little bit of inspiration in me to do a tier list of my own. And I thought that this would be a fun one to do. So my criteria is mostly going to be how I view these things in terms of importance, practicality for building up your comp squat, or if you don't compete, then just your conventional back squat that you would normally do and go heaviest on. And so some considerations that I'm looking for these are the practicality of the movement itself, as well as, its capability of being well progressively overloaded over time, and then just its overall effectiveness as a squat builder when it comes both to the musculature that is going to be worked and grown, as well as just the practical carryover to your actual squat. So let's get into it. So I'm just going to grab these kind of at random, throw them in. If you have any big disagreements with me, that's fine. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm wildly off base. I'll do my best to explain my rationale for these. But yeah, let's get into it. Hello, viewer. I realized after I recorded this video that I never set context parameters for each tier. So feel free to pause, read this really quick. S tier, I think everyone should do these essentially to grow their squat at some point in their career. A tier, I think that most people's squats would benefit from this, at least to a noticeable extent. B tier, I think a lot of people's squats can benefit from these, but the growth of their squat might be less than the things in A or S tier. C tier, I think some people will benefit from these, some won't benefit as much, especially compared to the things above it. D tier, I think in specific cases, people can benefit from these, but most people will not benefit from them to the extent that they would from the things above it on this list. And then F tier, I think that almost anything else would be better for squat development than the things in F tier. So I am going to start with the good morning, which is going to go into D tier. I personally do not find the good morning to be beneficial really at all. I can see that, there's people who have done good mornings and had success with them in terms of growing their squat over time and building up that posterior strength, specifically in the low back and some of the glutes through that bent over position and then through your hip extension forward. But I think the practical loading of this is pretty limited. And more often than not, I think you're just inducing more stress than you're really needing to in order to try to get that adaptation. And so for that reason, for me, it's going to go into D tier. I could see a case for F. I could see a case for C. I don't think I could put it anywhere above C and feel good about it. So next one, something that I think does that job a lot better is the RDL. So being in that hinged over position, folded over in the squat, getting your glutes involved, extending the hip forward, all that good stuff. I think the RDL does everything that the good morning does, except for that it's way more practical to load. It feels a lot more secure for the majority of people that I have talked to. And it's just going to have, in my opinion, a better pound per pound carryover into your squat. And then additionally, I think it's just a better carryover to your deadlift too. So I think in regards to what these two things are trying to train, I think the RDL does it better in pretty much every regard. But the reason, it's not hitting S or A is I don't think that RDLs are the crux of what's building your squat. And so that's why it's going to sit there. So front squats. I am not as hot on front squats as some people are. I think that front loaded position and getting it to be extremely quad dominant and trying to really maintain an upright position can be great. It can be great, but I think it's incredibly lifter specific, as well as there's certain just mobility needs that a person's going to need to have in order to load a front squat effectively anyways. And I just think it has high accessibility because all you need is a barbell, but in terms of the individual case by case basis, I think it's going to be real 50-50 on whether it's practical or not. And then in terms of actually just carrying over to your main squat, your main comp squat, I think you can find things that will have a little bit more specific carryover. I think front squats are great for addressing specific issues, but I don't necessarily think I would say that it's a must have in someone's program. However, what I do think is good to have in someone's program is lunges. And these are specifically weighted lunges, not just body weight lunges. So I'm going to put those into A tier. It's a unilateral exercise, one leg at a time. I always like to keep some form of unilateral work in someone's program that is performing a squatting function. So you're essentially forming a single leg squat. You're going to be getting the hip back, bending at the knee. Lunges are very easy to progressively overload. You can start from a body weight or even an assisted version of a lunge all the way up into, people do barbell lunges, dumbbell lunges. You could do them on a Smith machine. There's all sorts of things you can do with lunges. I think that they are definitely a high tier of squat builder, in my opinion, as an accessory movement. Okay, sissy squats. So I think sissy squats as a quad builder, and being very specific to sissy squats, they can be good. As far as they will go for actually developing a back squat in the sense where you'd be maxing out and trying to increase your 1 rep max, I'm not going to put them that high. I think I'll put them above good morning, but I don't think they're making it into that C tier. I don't think I would put in sissy squats for specifically growing the squat ahead of front squats. Great for quads, but I think we're talking about trying to build things for squat. I don't know if it's the best squat builder. Front foot elevated split squat. So this falls very similar into the range of lunges. I would say they're probably a tad less practical. I think they're good for people who are trying to get all the benefits of lunges, but perhaps for whatever mobility limitation, balance limitation, they're not really able to get down into their lunges. I think this can be an accessible way to get more range of motion out of it. But I don't always think that it's necessary, and I don't always think as a rule that more range of motion is inherently better. But I do think front foot elevated split squats can serve a really, really nice purpose in training. And that front foot elevated split squats are probably a slight bit lower for me than a weighted lunge, but still very close. And, actually I'll probably flip that, throw them at the front of B, pull the RDLs behind it. Personal opinion. Hatfield squats. I had just had an interesting conversation with Andrew Salant. We were talking about Hatfield squats, my experience with them. I think Hatfield squats are, I wouldn't say slept on by everyone, but I think they're slept on as a tool. So I'm going to throw them into B tier. I think that something that holds it back from being an S or an A is it's pretty inconvenient to set up, and you also need to have the training equipment to do it practically. You need to have an SSB bar and a rack with some sort of capability that has handles on it, so that you're able to do it effectively. I think that Hatfield squats are a really effective rehabilitation tool, or at the very least something that allows you to get good squatting volume within a very similar pattern. But perhaps in my instance, where I've used Hatfield squats the most, you tweak your back. You're pretty load limited in being able to actually put weight onto your back. Maybe you do something like a belt squat or some other variation where it's not as intensive on your back. For me, bridging that gap into coming back into axial loaded, putting weight on your back again to squat. Hatfields were something that was really nice because it provided a ton of stability, as well as from that stability, really being able to control the range of motion that I wanted to go through and the movement pattern. So really, I think it is a solid way to build squat. I also think that it could be a very valid accessory movement just for getting more squat volume, or as a secondary session to not induce as much fatigue for the primary. I think there's lots of good uses for Hatfield squats, and I just think that doing them practically is not super available. It's kind of hard to get set up and do all that stuff. So for that reason, it's going to hang out in B tier. Leg press. So you've got the leg press lovers and the leg press haters. I would say I'm not as bought into leg press as some people are. That being said, it's still very, very good. High accessibility. Almost every gym that I've ever been to has a leg press. There's definitely a decent range of quality of leg presses. However, if you are trying to get good range of motion and you are actually overloading it in a stance that is relatively similar to your back squat, I think it is totally viable to use leg press to build up a squat. It can be a secondary squat day, can be a squat accessory, but I think it is very solid. I'm not as big on it as other people, but I acknowledge what it has done and what it can do. Just a personal preference in my own training. Don't love doing it, but leg press is great. Step ups. So step ups, just like stepping up onto a box or something like that, pushing off the leg. I think that they're fine. I probably wouldn't say that you're going to find someone who is pretty strong, who is going to have much of a utility for these beyond other things. But I think for lighter lifters, potentially, more novice lifters, beginners, there's definitely something to this of being able to apply force and be aware of your balance. But that being the case, I probably can't see myself putting it anywhere above front squats. So for right now, that's where it's going to hang out. Pendulum squats. I'm not quite as hot on these, I feel like, as some other people are. I think kind of in that same lane of sissy squats, like really great leg builder, like quad builder. But I'd say it's a little bit removed from both people from actually being a pattern that's going to be very similar to your squat. But that being said, I'm going to shift these guys down and I'm going to throw it in the front of C. I think it's good. I think it's a more middle of the road than it is on the good side, but it's still good. It still has practical application. I think you're just going to find it to be a bit more person dependent. Raw squats. So this is my definition of a sleeveless or a beltless variation of squat. I think these are, when I see them used, I feel like mostly people are using them for the wrong reasons. I think that the reasons that I would want to use them in a program, if I gave someone beltless squats, reinforce bracing, try to figure out if their torso is doing something different between belted and beltless, just kind of get an idea of what their torso is doing, seeing if there's any movement deficiency that's happening there. On if you're doing them for squats and removing knee sleeves, potentially trying to see if there's something going on. Maybe you're relying too much on the knee sleeves. You're getting too much spring out of the bottom. You don't really know how to control. Things like that come to mind as being applicable. I would probably put these a tier below front squats. I think they do have utility, but it's going to fall into that kind of like niche problem solving category. Okay, Bosu ball squats, straight to F tier. You are taking something, a squat, which you generally want to be stable. If you wanted it to be more challenging as a balance component, you would probably do unilateral work or some side of, like a lunge, a walking lunge, or a reverse lunge, or something like that if you wanted to add that component to it. If you wanted to add instability for whatever reason, I guess Bosu ball squats is your thing, but not a reason that I personally can see leaning towards. Maybe if you have some sort of like ACL damage, injury that you're trying to repair and build up, maybe something like that would be a practical usage for it. But I'm going to say 99 out of 100 people are not going to make more meaningful progress on Bosu ball squats than anything above it on this list so far. Okay, Anderson squat. So it's like a pin squat, but you're starting from the pins instead of like walking it out, squatting down, coming to a stop on the pins and pushing up. It's where you're starting in that bottom position. I personally, within the context of powerlifting, probably don't think that Anderson squats are that great. That being said, I think they're better than Good Morning or Sissy squat for building squat. I think Anderson squats get more value with trying to progress other movements, and potentially you could have someone who's really struggling out of the bottom position on a squat, but I don't think that removing the eccentric component of the squat and just starting from a dead stop into the concentric is necessarily something that gives you an advantage training that way. I think that something like a pause squat, something like a pin squat are probably going to be just as effective at working at that skill deficiency of maintaining tension in the bottom and pushing up. But this removes the eccentric component, which I think also has a lot of value. And obviously, you still get an eccentric on the way back down to the pin again. But I just think it's probably doing the jobs of those a little bit worse. I think for something, a different movement that someone was trying to train, Anderson squats might have more value. But for your normal back squat, comp squat, I don't think it's providing as much value as some of the other things on here. All right. Smith machine. This just goes Smith machine squats in general as they pertain to doing max barbell work. I think that if this is all you have, it's all you have. But I generally think that confining yourself to a machine's bar path can sometimes have a disadvantage. And while I think on certain things like a leg press or a pendulum squat that I presented here, it's a little bit less detrimental because it's more so body is moving, legs are moving, and the weight's moving in space, all those things. Whereas the Smith machine squat is pretty much just you trying to squat like normal, but the bar path is fixed. And for some people, maybe this would be good as a corrective squat mechanism. If you have a Smith machine that's straight up and down and you're trying to work on someone's bar path, perhaps there's something to be said about doing that. But when it comes to like an angled Smith machine, I don't think it's the way to go. And additionally, I think it's kind of over talked about, like doing compounds to stabilize and using your stabilizer muscles and all that stuff. I think that is kind of overhyped. But I think there is some merit to it. And that is just the case when you look at someone who does a lot of free weight barbell squatting compared to someone who does Smith machine squatting. If you flip their places, I think the Smith machine person is going to have a lot more struggle pound for pound than the other person. So for that reason, I think I'm going to throw it into the C tier. I will probably throw step ups below it, but that's, I think, where it's going to land for me. Duffalo bar squats, they're cool. I don't have that much experience with them, but I don't think there's anything wrong with them. In terms of looking at the scaling here of like S being the thing that I think most people would want in their programming to benefit their squat, A tier being like, I think that most people should have this in their program, and B tier being like, this is probably a good thing to have in your program. In specific cases, it's definitely going to go above Hatfield squats, and probably above RDLs as well. I'll throw them right between front foot elevated split squats and RDLs. Definitely one of those things where, if you have shoulder mobility issues, this is definitely going to be like an A or S tier for you. But again, most people I don't think need to go to the Duffalo bar or the Buffalo bar, depending on which one you're using. But yeah, my general sentiments there. 1 1.25 squats. So some people really like these. Some people think they're really, really great. I'm not sold that they're any better than just doing normal reps. I understand what is the purpose. I understand why. I don't necessarily think that it's doing it better than just doing 2 reps or however many continuously. I'm not convinced of that, so I'm going to throw them into D tier, but I will throw them at the top of D tier. So if you're really into those, sorry. I've seen them a bit more recently. I'm just not sold on them right now. Overloaded walkout can also go into F tier. Now, these are something that some people like. I've done them before. I've given it to people before. The only thing I think you get out of this is psychological. There's no like physical adaptation that I think is meaningful in any way. I think it's just a psychological component of having felt that weight on your back before. So I think in the only instance I ever had someone do it is it was just like a confidence thing, is they wanted to feel the weight before they were going to go for it on the platform. And so like I just told them that they could. But I mean, it didn't do anything that I felt like was really meaningful other than provide lifter some confidence. So I am going to put those pretty low. I'd actually probably put both sumo squats above them and have that be accurate, just because at least that's a squat motion. So for a novice lifter, that's probably more beneficial. Yeah, not huge on the overloaded squat. I know that like Jen Thompson made a video of doing an overload, I think on squats and bench press. Yeah, just I don't think it's great. I think really great lifters can have great results doing a variety of different things. I think that Jen Thompson is a great lifter regardless of if she did overloaded walkouts or not. Sumo squats can go straight into the D tier. Let's go between Sissy and Anderson. So sumo squats, in relation to how they're actually going to build your normal squat, I'm going to say that not that great. I'm going to say that, they're fine. I'm sure as a novice, they would have some benefit, you squatting with a wider stance, getting a slightly different development, being a little bit more comfortable in different positions. But it's not really something that I'm interested in having in someone's program when it comes to squat development. Camber bar squats, these can just go right next to Duffalo bar. I'm going to put Duffalo bar ahead, but I don't have a strong opinion about that. That's just how they're lining up. At least in my experience of seeing how it's utilized, talking to people, it's pretty much just the same purpose of a Duffalo bar, but probably just a little bit harder to get your hands on. Maybe that's not true, but I feel like I've seen less than I have of a Duffalo or a Buffalo bar. So that's why it's going to go below. But other than that, I think that viable, good option if you're having issues. I think posterior chain gets loaded a little bit more with a camber squat. I could be wrong on that, but just fine. Good. Box squats. Box squats, they're all right. They're all right. I think that people kind of get lost in the sauce with box squats and they go kind of crazy with like quarter squatting to the box and just really focusing on rapid acceleration from that position, even though it's an easier place. Now, obviously, if you're doing equipped lifting, box squats might have a little bit more of a place. But I'm actually going to go ahead and throw these into D tier at the very top, just because when it comes to your general demographic, which I'm talking about here, which are powerlifters who are training, probably are falling out of that beginner category, novice upwards. I don't really think box squats is doing that much for them. Now, if you have a mobility deficiency, box squats can be very good. If you're doing equipped lifting, box squats certainly have a place in training. If you're just trying to teach someone how to squat, can help be a confidence builder. But in your average everyday lifter who is capable of squatting, just having this in your program, I don't think it's necessary. Could also be used for rehabbing some stuff, but yeah. Belt squat. So for me, S tier. I think belt squat, really for most, it depends on the build of the belt squat and the person. But for most people, this is going to be a really good way to mimic your squat pattern. Easily progressively overloadable. There's different versions. There's cable versions, and then you have things like your pit shark. And personally, I just think having a hip loaded variant where it's less on your back while being able to mimic the squat pattern, getting a super high amount of leg stimulus, without really beating up your back that much, I think is just an invaluable thing to be able to have access to. So for me, belt squats are S tier. Right next to it, Bulgarian split squats. Bulgarian split squats, rear foot elevated split squat, just an absolute gem of a single leg. Lunges and Bulgarian split squats, I mean, it's kind of pick your poison. I just have a bias towards Bulgarian split squats. I have not seen someone who has gotten stronger on the Bulgarian split squats and not had that translate to some effect over to their regular squats. If you start with 50-pound dumbbells doing sets of 5, and over the course of a year you get up to the 80s or 90s and you're doing them for sets of 5, I have a hard time believing that your back squat is not passively growing. And it's just overall great musculature development as well. You're going to hit the quads really hard. It's single leg unilateral work, and so your hip flexors are going to get a little bit more involved on that front as well as your hip is going to be going back and forth. So you're going to have some glute work in there as well. Just overall, very solid. Leg extensions. So leg extensions are going to go into the A tier for this reason, really. Again, if you're pushing leg extensions, if your quads are getting bigger, if they're getting heavier, quads are the main contributor, and the glutes, and there's obviously a lot of things at work going on in squat. But obviously, if you're just squatting and you're not really training your legs enough passively, it's hard to build your squat. Leg extensions are just a great way to hammer the quads without needing to beat yourself up with doing all these different like squat patterns, multi-joint. If you just need to get more quad stimulus, if you just need to get your quads bigger and stronger, leg extension, every single gym except for maybe hotel gym has them. Super accessible, just like the leg press, and just a great builder of your legs in general. Have a hard time believing you would not be able to progress your squat well without leg extension. Okay, so handful more here. SSB. So for me, these are going to go into the top of A tier. Now, for me personally, my own personal training, I would put SSB at the very tippy top of S tier. I think SSB has been huge for me in terms of my squat growth and development. But I think SSB is kind of person dependent based on your leverages. Some people I know struggle a lot with SSB squats, and some people are extremely proficient at it. I have a guy I program for, Kale, at Kale Lifts, shout out. And he is arguably stronger pound for pound off an SSB than his barbell back squat. And I would say I kind of fall into that category too, where I'd say my strength is extremely proportional between the two. And for those people, the reduction in stress on your shoulders, a little bit less stress on your back, at least that's been my experience, a little bit less stress on your back while being able to train that same squat pattern very, very similarly. Yeah, I'm really into it. I think SSB squats are awesome. Let's see. Pause squats. Pause squats are going to go into the S tier as well. So I think, I talked about box squats, 1.5, Anderson. I think all those are just a poor man's pause squat. High accessibility, same pattern. All you got to do is control the eccentric, come to a stop, explode out of it there. You have to maintain more tension. You have to just be really on top of all whatever cueing you do. But it's going to be pretty much as close to practical for applying to your normal back squat as it can be. I just think it's a harder version of your normal back squat, and it forces you to get good out of the hardest place, which is out of the bottom, accelerating up to the top. People get stuck in different places, but most of the place where people are going to be failing is that they're losing some sort of tension in the bottom, and they are not able to accelerate and keep tension in their body on the way up. Sometimes it's just strength issue, but if it's more than just purely strength and running out of gas, I think pause squats is an incredibly viable solution for training otherwise during the year to break through those positions. Tempo squats. These are gonna go down a tad. Probably throw them. Um, I'll throw them ahead of leg press personally. Great. Sometimes I think the eccentric component can be more demanding than we really need it to be in terms of overly controlling it down. But all that to say, tempo squats are accomplishing a lot of what pause squats are doing as well, just being very controlled in that same pattern. High accessibility, all you need is the same equipment as your normal bar. And as far as variation goes, it's a good variation. I don't have a lot else to say other than that. Okay, goblet squats. Goblet squats are good. I don't have anything bad to say about goblet squats. The only thing that I have to say about goblet squats to their detriment is that you're going to reach a point where they are just too light. And it's not really practical to carry a heavy dumbbell around in front of you and try to squat it like that. At that point, you're kind of run into front squats. If you wanted to keep loading that. But I do think goblet squats very accessible. They don't necessarily have the mobility demand that a front squat does. And as far as they go, I'd probably use them more as an accessory for lighter, probably not as strong and is fitting into that beginner to novice category of squat accessory for them. But it's good. I like it. I think goblet squats are great. And I think for a lot of people, they can be beneficial. Pin squats. So pin squats, I think they're probably a little bit worse than pause squats, but I think they still fall above some of these other squat variations. And so I'm going to throw them into the top of C tier, honestly. So with pin squats, I mean, I think that some people are going to get a lot less out of them just because coming to that sudden stop in the bottom, where there's like an external force that's bringing that bar to a stop and not themselves, can be a little bit problematic. But for most people, I don't think it's that much of an issue as long as they're controlling the bar well enough. But can be a great tool for controlling your squats, needing to get good at accelerating out of the bottom and using something other than yourself. Because I think for most people, it's good to be able to control the bar to that stop. But for some people, it kind of forces them to embrace that realization that, oh, I'm not really controlling it. I'm not really bringing that bar to a stop efficiently. And then through doing the pin squats, it forces them to. Okay, 4 more here. Chained and banded squats. So, not big on these. For me, these are probably going to fall into... They're going to be in D tier. I just got to decide what to move around. I think they're better than good mornings for building your squat. I think they're better than sissy squats for building your squat. I think they're better than sumo squats for building your squats. I don't think they're better than Anderson. So that is where it's going to fall. So accommodating resistance, like, it has its time and place in training. I think athletic development for people who fall outside of like powerlifting, they're in like athletics, can definitely get more out of it. And again, I think equipped lifting, there's some reasons to have it in here. But as far as raw powerlifting goes, I don't think that accommodating resistance is doing a lot. As I've stated a couple times in here, I think the hardest spot for squats is out of the bottom, and a lot of the issues for why you would fail come from accelerating out of the bottom. And so while you go down into those and the load does get harder, so in theory you have to accelerate harder and harder to get out of it, but in reality, the higher position you get, the easier it's getting, the better leveraged you are for force output. And at the end of the day, maybe you get really strong at, like, once you're out of the hole, you snap through the rest of your squat. Cool, that's great. But I don't think that when you're more than halfway up, that's the part that people are really failing at and struggling consistently. And so for that reason, it falls more on the less practical side. It's a lot of setup. It's a lot of trying to, get an exact resistance profile, which can be challenging if you don't have a home gym with that equipment. and I say home gym, loose, a gym that you go to would count as well, that always has that equipment. But yeah, so they just fall a little bit worse on the scale for me. I don't think that there's no place for them. I mean, they're in company with, box squats, 1.25, Anderson, sumo squats, sissy squats, good mornings. There are certainly places that people can use these, but I think that on average, there's almost always a better pick. So next up, hack squats. Hack squats are going to go into the A tier. Hack squats are pretty freaking rad. I personally would put them above the leg press. I think that they are harder. They force you to work more. And I just think that the positioning is often a little bit more specific than the leg press. And I don't want to come across as a specificity is all that matters guy. But just in the context of trying to get your squat better, the hack squat, I would probably argue, is one of the harder variations you can do on machine. And I think that that's a positive thing because it forces people into positions that they're not as strong, just driving really hard with your quads in that upright position. But yeah. So, Zercher squats. Zercher squats, pretty cool. I wouldn't say that Zercher squats need to live in everyone's programs, though. And I wouldn't say that most people need to even have Zercher squats in their program. Now, I think more general fitness people should probably be doing Zercher squats. It's probably a little bit more practical to the lifestyle needs and wanting to get stronger in that way. The loading profile is slightly different, and some people, if you're having some pains, potentially Zercher squats can be a good way to still do a loaded squat pain-free. You can also reduce the range of motion a little bit on a Zercher squat. It being more front-loaded and having it tight to the body can make people feel good about it. So I'm going to throw it into the C tier, actually at the top. I have grown to like Zercher squats more over time, but I still think on average, actually, I'm going to throw pin squats ahead. Sorry, I lied. But pin squats are going to go ahead of Zercher squats for me. But yeah, I think Zercher squats are a valid tool to have in the toolbox. I just don't think everyone needs them, frankly. So this last one, alternative bar position. So high bar squatter squatting low bar squat squatting higher. This one is hard. I think depending on the person, it can be as low as C tier, and I think it can be as high as S tier. And normally, I mean, that would kind of lead to like, am I going to go between B or A, deciding what I think is the best to do. Personally, I'm actually just going to throw it in A tier, and I'm going to throw it behind SSB, and I'm going to throw it behind lunges. But I'm going to throw it ahead of tempo squats. So alternative bar position, I think a lot of low bar squatters get too comfortable with being folded over. They develop that posterior strength too much. They don't really get a good feel of driving through their quads, pushing up to that position, challenging themselves in that way. Vice versa, you might have a high bar squatter who just has no real capacity to use their posterior chain. When they're deadlifting, it's just all upright quad. In the moment that they get tipped over, they're done. They have no capacity to fight. And I think that can be a problem. And I think that alternative bar position, it presents a challenge for a little bit of new adaptation, but it still keeps things very similar. And then it falls into that like super easy to access. All you have to do is change the position of the bar on your back. So yeah, I think that they're great. So looking through these again, I'm going to walk through them, talk through them, see if I think I need any rearranging. But starting out, S tier, belt squat. Those are probably my number one. It can be a secondary, it can be a tertiary, it can just be an accessory. I think it can do everything, and it's slightly lower stress than having the bar on your back, which I think makes it totally viable for rehabbing and stuff like that too. Bulgarian split squats, high accessibility, unilateral exercise, easy to progress, very specific, love it. Pause squats, you already know the deal. I've talked about pause squats a lot. A tier, SSB, for me would probably be in the S tier, but I understand they don't necessarily work for everyone, but I think most people can benefit from using it. Lunges, I think, are excellent. Probably at the very, very high levels of squatters, you'll find these being a bit less effective, but I think most people doing weighted lunges can do them very effectively, whether that be a standing lunge, a walking lunge, a reverse lunge, all great options. Alternative bar position, just talked about that one. I think it's in a good place. I think it has a lot of practical utility. You're going to find some people who just like high bar squatters who don't need to do low bar, and low bar squatters who don't need to do high bar. But I think for most people, some form of alternative work at some point in their lifting career will become a good variation to pursue. Tempo squats, think are great. I just don't think everyone needs to have that eccentric drawn out, but for a lot of people, it can be great for positioning and bracing and making sure that you're keeping good tension into the hole on squat. Hack squat, probably my second favorite machine variation behind the belt squat for growing the squat. Leg press just behind hack squat. Definitely just personal preference between those two, whichever you enjoy more and get better results with. Leg extension, like I said, I understand it's not a actual squat motion, but just being able to train your quads without having to have it be a multi-joint movement, I think is invaluable. And obviously, if you're very fatigued from doing squats, you could probably still do more with your quads at the end and end up being able to make some gains there. Front foot elevated split squat, I think, is good there. Duffalo, cambered, great. RDL, Hatfield, Goblet. I think all of those sound good. Pin squats, Zercher squats, pendulum squats. I think I like the order of those three. Front squats, that's fine right in the middle of there. No equipment on raw squat, Smith machine, step ups. Those I think are all good too. So now D tier, box squats, 1.25 squat, Anderson squat, chained and band squats, sumo, sissy, good morning. Yeah, I feel like all of those, they have their time, they have their place. I can't really imagine giving them to people on a normal basis unless there was a very one-off reason why this person needed those things. And then F tier, I wouldn't really ever see myself giving these to someone except for maybe on a one-off case. But yeah, so generally my thoughts. If you guys think I missed anything or if you would put something in a different place, let me know. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.